Hello, this is Poets Talk Poetry. My name is Mary Ann Rockwell, and I'm a librarian at Saratoga Springs Public Library. And each month I invite a poet to read and discuss a poem that they love by another poet, and then read and discuss one of their own poems. Today I am delighted to have as my guest the poet Denise Duhamel. Denise is a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. She's a distinguished university professor in the MFA program at the Florida International University in Miami. Denise's most recent book of poetry is Second Story, which I ordered for our library and can't wait to read. Thank you. Her other titles include Scald, Blowout, Ka-ching, 2 and 2, and Queen for a Day, which I tried to get from our library shelf, but it was checked out. New and Selected Poems, and Star Spangled Banner, and Kinky. She has other books of prose. And I just wanted to say that to sit down with a book of Denise's poems is like opening a box of delicious chocolates because you can't eat just one. So, Denise, welcome. And you're going to read a poem first by Sharon Olds.
Correct. Thank you, Mary Ann, for inviting me. This is great. It's great to see you, and it's great to be here. Yes, so the poem I chose to read is by Sharon Olds, and it's called The Race. When I got to the airport, I rushed up to the desk, bought a ticket. 10 minutes later, they told me the flight was canceled. The doctors had said my father would not live through the night, and the flight was canceled. A young man with a dark brown mustache told me another airline had a nonstop leaving in 7 minutes. See that elevator over there? We'll go down to the first floor, make a right. You'll see a yellow bus, get off at the second Pan Am terminal. I ran. I, who have no sense of direction, raced exactly where he told me, a fish slipping upstream deftly against the flow of the river. I jumped off that bus with those bags I had thrown everything into in 5 minutes and ran. The bags wagged me from side to side as if to prove I was under the claims of the material. I ran up to a man with a flower on his breast. I, who always go to the end of the line, I said, help me. He looked at my ticket. He said, make a left and then a right, go up the moving stairs and then run. I lumbered up the moving stairs. At the top, I saw the corridor, and then I took a deep breath. I said goodbye to my body, goodbye to comfort. I used my legs and heart as if I would gladly use them up for this, to touch him again in this life. I ran and the bags banged against me, wheeled and coursed in skewed orbits. I have seen pictures of women running, their belongings tied in scarves grasped in their fists. I blessed my long legs he gave me, my strong heart I abandoned to its own purpose. I ran to gate 17, and they were just lifting the thick white lozenge of the door to fit into the socket of the plane. Like the one who is not too rich, I turned sideways and slipped through the needle's eye, and then I walked down the aisle toward my father. The jet was full, and people's hair was shining. They were smiling. The interior of the plane was filled with a mist of golden endorphin light. I wept as people weep when they enter heaven in massive relief. We lifted up gently from one tip of the continent and did not stop until we sat down lightly on the other edge. I walked into his room and watched his chest rise slowly and sink again. All night, I watched him breathe. So I love this poem so much. And it was published first in The Father in 1992, Sharon Olds' book, The Father. But I had this very clear memory. No, I read it way before then in The New Yorker. And I did. So I looked it up. My memory was actually right for once. And it came out in 1985 in The New Yorker. And I was going to grad school at the time. And I remember reading the poem at Key Foods. And, you know, just like there was a long line, and I saw Sharon Olds' name, and of course I went to her poem, and I actually put back 2 bottles of cream soda so I could have money to buy this issue. That's how much this poem meant to me. And it was, I hadn't lived through anything like this at the time, but I just knew that this poem was going to teach me something about life, and it did. And so, yeah. Anyway, it's just amazing in so many ways.
It really is. And just some of the things that I noticed is that it's as though she's chronicling without sentiment a tragic event or an emergency, how we feel when we're under great stress, but in such a dispassionate way, and just giving every detail. For example, notices a young man with a dark brown mustache, and then it's one entire sentence. See that elevator there? And then I, who have no sense of direction, raced exactly where he told me, a fish slipping upstream. So kind of what we would do when we're under extreme circumstances.
Yes.
Expressed.
Exactly. Like almost like the woman lifting, I don't know, this is probably not even real or apocryphal, but you know, that idea that the woman lifts the car off her child or whatever. I mean, I don't know if that's even real, but it seems like when you're in those situations, you just go, okay, I have to do this, you know, I'm not good at this, but I'm going to do it, you know. And I also really loved at the end, you know, everything is getting her onto that plane. And then we sat down lightly on the other edge. I walked into his room. So we don't see her get, you know, the relief, right? So we don't see her get in the cab at LAX or wherever this is and going to the hospital. You know, it's just that, like, I did it. I'm here.
Right. Well, she knows once she's on the plane, she's home free to see him.
Yeah.
And she even says, I walked, I love the ending is like a turn, because there's all this kind of panic and running and the world turning sideways. And then once she gets in the plane, it's like an angelic choir starts singing or something. But she says, I don't know, there's all this also kind of spiritual references, like one who was not too rich, I turned sideways and slipped through the needle's eye and walked down the aisle toward my father. So we see her kind of moving toward him just at that moment.
I also thought, I love that. That's such a great, you know, yeah, she's walking toward the aisle in the plane, but is walking towards her father. And I couldn't help think of like the young bride or so. I mean, I know the father would probably traditionally be beside her, but you know, it's like the aisle of, you know, getting married too, or it's so brilliant in every way.
Yeah.
I absolutely love this poem. And also like the dialogue I thought was something that, you know, like do this, do that, boom, boom, boom. I mean, that's just embedded in the sentence.
She gets corrections from 2 different people. And so one's the guy with the mustache and one's the guy with the flower on his breast. So it's like they're just these landmarks that are showing her the way, and it's as if she's being kind of guided or helped by some unseen forces. So there's kind of a leap of faith going on in the poem too.
Absolutely. And just like, it's hard to write about emergencies and panic and without being completely sentimental. And I think she just strikes the right, like when it gets too intense, you know, it's like I have seen women, where is that part? With the, so I ran and the bags banged against me and wheeled and coursed in skewed orbits. I've seen pictures of women running, their belongings tied in scarves. It's like the way memory works in those. I mean, I don't know if that was actual to her experience, but it seems completely real to me.
Like memory, everything's jostled around in her brain and in her body, and related kind of, And also there's a sense of being an out of body experience, you know, like I ran and the bags banged against me. And there's another reference to the bags. The bags wagged me from side to side to prove I was under the claims of the material, like versus the spiritual, like but she's resisting that somehow, So.
Yeah, like the material of the bags, but like the material world, right? I know, it's just
right.
Yeah. So
Anyhow, we could go on and on, but
I could. I won't.
Well, you could go on a little more if you want. Is there anything else you want to say about the poem?
Well, I just thought, they're technically really long sentences or even run-on sentences. I thought that worked really well too. It wasn't a lot of periods. I mean, each sentence is maybe like 5, 6, 7 lines. So there's this sense of rushing through the airport, which I thought was great. I mean, it was rushing, right? Because of the lack of periods, like boom, 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 boom. But it was also so like boing, boing, boing. I don't know. It's just so specific and not harried in the way that it could have been, I guess. I mean, she's definitely under stress, but it's the way
she chose to convey it was very methodical, even though in her head she wasn't feeling that way. She was just going.
Yeah, like we do in like coping, right? The coping, getting,
Right. So now we're going to hear your poem, which I'm very excited about.
Thank you. Thank you. So as I said, I read the Sharon Olds poem. I bought the New Yorker, which I can't find. It's got to be in here somewhere. But I remember buying it and like treasuring it and reading it. And maybe even, I think I had memorized it at one point. And I mean, I've always been a Sharon Olds fan, but somehow about this poem, as I said, it was almost like a premonition, like you're going to need this poem one day.
Wow.
So it was a really weird feeling, which I did. So I'm sure all of us eventually have something like this. And so I didn't have this poem exactly with me while I wrote these poems, but it was in my head for so long that I know it was there when I wrote this. Okay, so this is flash forward to, so hers was written in 85, and now Casino, which is from Ka-Ching, the book that you held up, one of the books that came out in 2009, but I know I wrote this poem in, 2003, probably like September or October that month. And it's called Casino. When my sister says there's been an accident, I think car, then bus, but she says no, escalator and pile up. When my sister says the words mother and scalped, I think cowboys and Indians, tiny shrunken heads, the blood all boiled out, warpaths. When my sister says the words father and collapsed, I turn the TV sound down. It's Thursday morning, September 11th, 2003, the memorial, the reading of names. I had planned to go to BJ's and Publix today, shop for a dinner party tomorrow. It happened yesterday. Mom was in surgery for a very long time. The hospital is just calling now. Atlantic City, my sister says, I can drive there in 4 or 5 hours. I tell her I can fly. I hang up. Nick gets online. He finds a direct flight on Spirit. I remember my mother telling my sister and me to braid our hair before riding the Ferris wheel, and a story about a girl's loose curls flying into the gears, being torn out in chunks, her blood, warm red specks, dripping onto the seats below, and how the carnie had to stop the ride with a jolt, and how a fireman shot up in a bucket truck with a pair of scissors to release the screaming girl. When the ride went back on, the passengers got off one by one, no one smiling or laughing anymore. And I was never sure if my mother was on that ride or in the park that day, or if it was just a story she liked to tell. The girl's hair scattered, whipping by the horses and the merry-go-round, twisting into the cotton candy. And my mother's hair, also left behind in some gear, her blood soaking the silver escalator steps, the casino carpet. Up and down and round, all the bald lemons and cherries spinning.
Wow.
Thanks. It's harder to say stuff about my poem because it's like, because I wrote it, I guess. But yeah, but I know I just felt the direct connection to the race as I was writing this.
Yeah. And well, we're informed by the poets that we love, the way I dabble at poetry writing, so I know that just I gravitate toward working in a style of someone I'm familiar with, you know. But can you talk a little about it, the poem?
Sure. So this is actually like based on a true story. So my parents were in this horrible escalator accident, and I'm just thinking of this now. I hadn't even thought of this. That Sharon Olds mentions the moving stairs, which she climbs to get to her. I just thought of it right now. I hadn't thought of that connection before. But so they were in Atlantic City, and there was this horrific accident where all these people toppled on top of each other. It was horrible. And so my mom's hair was really caught in the steps. It was horrible, just very disfiguring and horrible. And then my dad was with her, and he had a heart event. And so it was like this call from my sister, which you try to process as it's happening, right? Yeah. And so it was really based on like true events. So I think I just started writing about it immediately. So there's in Kaching, there's like a lot of poems there's one about washing my father's hair and taking care of my mother afterwards and so forth, because it was a really long, it was horrible. But they came home at some point, so I was taking care of them. And so I don't know, I wrote everything down. I just remember I couldn't sleep anyway. I was a wreck, so I would just be writing in my journal. And then like some of these poems were there.
They just happened. It's the writing process.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's so weird to me because, like it's like that recollection collected in tranquility was not the way I wrote these at all.
Right. And I think but a poem is sometimes a vessel or a container for things that are tragic or awful in our lives. And it's like a mediating kind of entity. And that's what I thought about this poem, because in some way it's just so beautifully composed and everything comes together, but that's not what the poem's about. The poem's about randomness, random events, the casino. You take your luck at the casino and all the bald lemons and cherries spinning. Oh, so sad, and round and round, there's a lot of circularness.
Mm-hmm. I also wanted the Ferris wheel too, right?
Yeah, the Ferris wheel, the gears, the merry-go-round, the twisting. Mm-hmm. And I thought too about, there was a story my mother read to me when I was a kid from the New York Times about we were going to go to the zoo. So she said, don't go too close to the lion's cage, because a little girl got pulled into the lion's cage once and was eaten by the lion. And I was like, at an age where I was just horrified. I never forgot it. And I had all these images. But I see that in your poem, like the last line here, the girl's hair scattered, whipping by the horses in the merry-go-round, twisting in the cotton candy. And so it's not linear or irrational, but it's like what a kid, I don't know, what you took from her story.
Exactly. All my mom said was like, here's some like, elastic bands or whatever. You better not let your hair go like in the wind, because it could get in this thing. Yeah. And then the rest is all just made up. but how a little girl, and how I did actually think about it.
Yeah.
I saw a full-blown horrifying cartoon when she said that, in my head.
Right. But then I think, can you talk about how stories, so your mother told a story, and stories put things at a distance, put awful events at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
We read fiction and it's okay because it's not happening to us. The tragedy isn't happening to us until it does, and that's what happens in your poem with your mother.
Mm-hmm. And then the irony to me of that, my mom was always afraid for us, right? And then, but it happened to her, it didn't happen to so far. It hasn't happened. So I thought that was a weird thing too, that how she would just, it's almost like a little premonition of her own, or she had so much fear of these, like her hair getting caught in, or our hair, or anybody's hair getting caught in something. And then hers did,
Yeah. Yeah. So sad.
Very weird.
Yeah. But Is there anything else you would like to share with us about the poems or your
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess one thing that Sharon Olds didn't do in this poem, but she does in some of her other poems, is put dates in it. You know, so she goes back to May 1934, I think it is, and it's her parents getting married, or, you know, so like, I guess, and well, that could be Frank O'Hara too, like people who date their poems. So I actually did put in a date, which now seems so far away. But when I think back, it would have only been 2 years since 9/11. So it was still.
Yeah, and that's I love that. I mean, each paragraph has a distinct paragraph. Verse has a distinct kind of, because you write, sometimes your poems are like prose poems to me, you know. And so the verse about father, you're doing this word association, father, and collapsed, and then you're like, it like dawns on you what's happening maybe, and then September 11th is on your television, the memorial is on your screen. Turn it down. It's like another tragedy on the same day as September 11th. And then you were going to go shopping for a dinner party, and life is what happens when you're making other plans.
Yes.
So, as John Lennon said, I think somebody said that. So, but yeah.
Yes, true. Yeah. And I do remember, it didn't make it into any of the poems, but I remember going to the airport, and I had bought a one-way ticket because I had no idea what I was.
Oh.
So that was a whole lot of, because it was on 9/11, 2 years after 9/11, and I show up, like, you know what I mean? So I had to go through, I think I was pulled aside. It was just a horrible day. But that part, for some reason, got blurred in my memory. Thank goodness. And then I wasn't buying a return ticket, and it was like, oh my God.
It's like Sharon Olds' poem in that way, that like we don't see all the steps that got you, that you took along the way.
Correct. Yeah, right. I didn't even think of that, right? I just, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It's beautiful, and it's so moving.
Thank you.
And we're just so happy to have you. I know that many people will be looking to hear you read on this video. So thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Our library today.
Thank
nice
you.
To see you. Okay.
All right. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.